Greetings, this is Brother Eli with another episode of Bible Truth Revealed. Today's teaching is entitled, Should Israelite Men Shave Our Heads Bald? That is, should Israelite men shave our heads bald? The Holy Scriptures, which Christians call the Old Testament, make it clear that there is absolutely nothing wrong with going bald naturally. Therefore, this teaching will focus on the practice of Israelite men intentionally shaving their heads bald. Is this something we are allowed to do, or is it a sin? This teaching will aim to answer the following questions. 1. Is it wrong or shameful to be naturally bald? 2. What are the potential psychological effects of natural baldness? 3. Is it a sin for Israelite men to shave our heads bald? 4. Are we allowed to shave our heads when we are not mourning? And 5. What about Israelite men who claim to be in a constant state of mourning? Are they allowed to keep shaving their head bald? Question number 1. Is it wrong or shameful to be naturally bald? I'll read Leviticus chapter 13, verses 40 to 41. This is Leviticus chapter 13, verses 40 to 41, and I'll be reading from the Brenton Septuagint translation. It reads thus: And if anyone's head should lose the hair, he is only bald, he is clean. And if his head should lose the hair in front, he is forehead bald, he is clean. This passage makes it clear that losing the hair from the top or front of your head is not normally a cause for concern. It is a natural process that affects many men. So it is not wrong or shameful to be naturally bald. Question number 2. What are the potential psychological effects of natural baldness? In the New World Encyclopedia, under the heading Baldness and subheading Psychological Effects, quote 1 says this: The psychological effects for individuals experiencing hair loss vary widely. Some people adapt to the change comfortably, while others have severe problems relating to anxiety, depression, social phobia, and in some cases, identity change. So we can see that some people suffer tremendously when they are naturally going bald. Therefore, this is a very sensitive issue that must be addressed without adding to the anxiety, depression, or phobia of those who are naturally going bald. Quote number 2 says, Psychological problems due to baldness, if present, are typically most severe at the onset of symptoms. So when someone is first going bald, that is when they normally have the most severe psychological problems. Stress, anxiety, phobia, you name it. If you see someone who is naturally bald or balding, bear in mind that they may be struggling with this issue. Do not mock them or cause them to feel even more insecure than they might already be feeling. Now let's look at 4 Kings chapter 2 in the Brenton Septuagint translation. It's 2 Kings chapter 2 in the KJV. I'll be reading 4 Kings chapter 2 verses 23 to 24. It says, And he went up thence to Bethel. So this is talking about the prophet Elijah. And as he was going up by the way, there came up also little children from the city, and mocked him. So these little children were mocking the prophet Elijah and said to him, "Go up, bald head, go up." So they are mocking his bald head. They are laughing at the fact that he is bald. Verse 24. And he turned after them and saw them and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And behold, there came out 2 bears out of the wood, and they tore 42 children of them. So the prophet cursed these children in the name of the Most High, and 2 bears came out of the wood and tore 42 children in pieces. The moral of the story is, be careful who you mock. It just might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and they just might curse you. And if they do, there is a chance that the Most High will honor their curse and initiate your destruction. Many people read this biblical account and wonder why the prophet Elijah cursed the children and why the bears tore them apart for what appeared to be just fun and games. However, it was not fun and games for the prophet Elijah, and it is not fun and games for many people today who are struggling with natural baldness. Now let's turn our attention to those Israelite men who intentionally shave their heads bald. Question number 3. Is it a sin for Israelite men to shave our heads bald? Based on Leviticus chapter 21 verse 5, many people believe that it is a sin for Israelite men to shave their heads bald. Let's examine Leviticus chapter 21 verse 5 in context so I can demonstrate that this is not the case. Leviticus chapter 21, I'll be reading verses 1 to 5. Verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and thou shalt tell them that they shall not defile themselves in their nation for the dead, but they may mourn for a relative who is very near to them, for a father and mother, and sons and daughters, for a brother, and for a virgin sister that is near to one, that is not espoused to a man. For these one shall defile himself. Verse 4. He shall not defile himself suddenly among his people to profane himself. And ye shall not shave your head for the dead with a baldness on the top, and they shall not shave their beard, neither shall they make gashes on their flesh. The priests, the sons of Aaron, were forbidden to shave their heads bald when mourning for the dead. Leviticus chapter 21 verse 5 is only for the priests. This law does not apply to Israelite men who are not priests. Apart from the Levitical priests, Israelite men are allowed to shave our heads bald when we are mourning. Let's consider a few examples where the Most High explicitly commanded our forefathers to shave their heads bald as part of the mourning process. Micah chapter 1 verse 16. Micah chapter 1 verse 16 says, Shave thine hair and make thyself bald. Again, shave thine hair and make thyself bald for thy delicate children. Increase thy widowhood as an eagle, for thy people are gone into captivity from thee. The Most High commanded these people to shave their head bald because of the captivity. We were supposed to mourn the captivity of our people, and shaving our heads bald is part of the mourning process. Isaiah chapter 22 I will read verses 3 to 5 and verses 12 to 14. That's Isaiah chapter 22, verses 3 to 5 and verses 12 to 14, and it says, All thy princes have fled, and thy captives are tightly bound, and the mighty men in thee have fled far away. Therefore I said, Let me alone. I will weep bitterly. Labor not to comfort me for the breach of the daughter of my people. This is mourning. Verse 5. For it is a day of trouble and of destruction and of treading down, and there is perplexity sent from the Lord of hosts. They wander in the valley of Zion. They wander from the least to the greatest on the mountains. The people are in a state of destruction. This is reason to mourn. Verse 12. And the Lord of hosts, called in that day for weeping and lamentation and baldness. The Most High called or commanded in that day of destruction, for weeping and lamentation and baldness. He commanded these people to shave their heads bald. It continues, and for girding with sackcloth. Verse 13. But they engaged in joy and gladness. They did the opposite of what the Most High commanded, slaying calves and killing sheep, so as to eat flesh and drink wine, saying, Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. So the Most High wanted the people to mourn and to shave their heads bald as part of the mourning process. But instead, they said, let's have a party, because tomorrow we die. Verse 14. And these things are revealed in the ears of the Lord of hosts. For this sin shall not be forgiven you until ye die. It was a sin for the people not to shave their heads bald in mourning when the Most High explicitly commanded them to do so. We are supposed to do what the Most High commanded. And in this case, he commanded that the people shave their heads bald in mourning. In the pulpit commentary, the quote for Isaiah chapter 22 verse 12, baldness, says this: It has been said that baldness was forbidden by the law, but this is not so absolutely. Baldness was wholly forbidden to the priests, and certain peculiar modes of shaving the hair, the beard, and the eyebrows practiced by idolatrous nations were prohibited to all the people. But such shaving of the head as was practiced by Job and other pious men was not forbidden to laymen. Again, shaving of the head was not forbidden to laymen any more than the wearing of sackcloth. It was regarded as a natural mode of exhibiting grief. Shaving of the head, just like Job did, was not forbidden to laymen, meaning men who were not priests. It was regarded as a natural mode of exhibiting grief. In other words, it was a natural part of the mourning process. Let's read about Job in Job chapter 1, verses 18 to 22. That's Job chapter 1, verses 18 to 22, and it reads, While he is yet speaking, another messenger comes, saying to Job, While thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking with their elder brother, suddenly a great wind came on from the desert and caught the four corners of the house. And the house fell upon thy children, and they are dead. So Job has just received news that his children are dead. He has cause for mourning. It continues, and I have escaped alone, and am come to tell thee. Verse 20. So Job arose and rent or tore his garments and shaved the hair of his head. Why did he shave the hair of his head? Because it's a natural part of the mourning process. And fell on the earth and worshipped and said, I myself came forth naked from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. As it seemed good to the Lord, so has it come to pass. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Verse 22. In all these events that befell him, Job sinned not at all before the Lord, and did not impute folly to God. So nothing that Job did in response to these unfortunate events was a sin. That means when Job arose and rent his garments and shaved the hair of his head, that was not sin. It is not a sin for Israelite men to shave our heads bald in mourning. This was a normal practice in Hebrew culture. It is not a sin. Let's consider yet another example of the Most High causing the people to make their heads bald while mourning. Amos chapter 8, I will read verses 9 and 10. That's Amos chapter 8 verses 9 to 10, and it reads thus. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord God, that the sun shall go down at noon, and the light shall be darkened on the earth by day. And I will turn your feasts into mourning, and all your songs into lamentation. And I will bring up sackcloth on all loins, and baldness on every head. So the Most High said that he would turn the feast into mourning, and that he would bring baldness on every head. Mourning and baldness go hand in hand. It continues, and I will make them as the mourning of a beloved friend, and those with them as a day of grief. Ezekiel chapter 7 verses 15 to 18. Ezekiel chapter 7 verses 15 to 18 says, There shall be war with the sword without, and famine and pestilence within. He that is in the field shall die by the sword, and famine and pestilence shall destroy them that are in the city. This is reason for mourning. Verse 16. But they that escape of them shall be delivered, and shall be upon the mountains, and I will slay all the rest, every one for his iniquities. All hands shall be completely weakened, and all thighs shall be defiled with moisture. And they shall gird themselves with sackcloth, and amazement shall cover them, and shame shall be upon them, even upon every face, and baldness upon every head. Baldness goes hand in hand with mourning. It should be clear that it is not a sin for an Israelite man to shave his head bald as part of the mourning process. They go hand in hand. Question number 4. Are we allowed to shave our heads when we are not mourning? 2 Kings chapter 14 in the Brenton Septuagint translation is 2 Samuel chapter 14 in the KJV. I will read 2 Kings chapter 14 verses 25 to 26. It says, And there was not a man in Israel so very comely as Absalom. So Absalom was the son of David, and he was a handsome man. From the sole of his foot even to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. And when he polled his head, and it was at the beginning of every year that he polled it, because it grew heavy upon him. Even when he polled it, he weighed the hair of his head, 200 shekels, according to the royal shekel. So Absalom is famous for having very long hair. He only had a haircut once a year, and when he did not shave his head bald. Shaving one's head bald was reserved for when we were in mourning. It was not normal practice for Israelite men to shave their heads bald while not in mourning. Absalom simply polled his head. What does this mean, to poll his head? The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines the word poll as to cut off or cut short the hair or wool off. A synonym is crop. So to cut your hair short is to poll your hair. The word crop is defined as a close cut of the hair, to cut off short or trim. So we can get low or short haircuts, a close cut. The word trim is defined as to make trim and neat, especially by cutting or clipping. We can cut or clip our hair, we can trim them and make them neat. But there is no justification for shaving our heads bald when we are not in mourning. There is no requirement for Israelite men to cut our hair. However, if we decide to do so, we can cut our hair short instead of removing all the hair from our heads. Removing all the hair should be reserved for the mourning process. Instead, we may make our hair neat by cutting or clipping them. There is no need to shave our heads bald under normal circumstances. To learn about another legitimate reason for shaving all the hair from our bodies, including our head, please listen to my teaching entitled, Does God Want Me to Grow a Beard? That is, does God want me to grow a beard? Question number 5. What about Israelite men who claim to be in a constant state of mourning? Are they allowed to keep shaving their head bald? Actually, this is an excuse that some Israelite men may choose to use in order to keep shaving their heads bald. So let's look again at Isaiah chapter 22, verses 12 to 14. Isaiah chapter 22, verses 12 to 14 says, And the Lord of hosts, called in that day for weeping and lamentation and baldness and for girding with sackcloth. So the Most High calls for baldness plus girding with sackcloth. You don't get to pick baldness and claim to be mourning without wearing sackcloth. They go hand in hand. Baldness, sackcloth, and mourning. Verse 13. But they engaged in joy and gladness, slaying calves and killing sheep, so as to eat flesh and drink wine, saying, Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. They are Israelite men who claim to be in mourning, but they continue to engage in joy and gladness. They are partying while claiming to be in mourning. That is making a mockery of the Most High and of his people. Verse 14. And these things are revealed in the ears of the Lord of hosts, for the sin shall not be forgiven you until ye die. If you are claiming to be in a constant state of mourning and you are not girding yourself with sackcloth, you are simply making a mockery, and the sin shall not be forgiven you. Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 18. Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 18 says, And they shall gird themselves with sackcloth, not in business suits, not in the latest fashion, but in sackcloth, and amazement shall cover them, and shame shall be upon them, even upon every face, and baldness on every head. If you are claiming to be in mourning to justify continuing to shave your head bald, you better be wearing sackcloth, or you're simply mocking the Most High. Amos chapter 8 verse 10. Amos chapter 8 verse 10 says, "And I will turn your feasts into mourning, and all your songs into lamentation. And I will bring up sackcloth on all loins, and baldness on every head." Sackcloth and baldness go together. If you're not wearing sackcloth, don't claim to be mourning as an excuse to shave your head bald. It continues, "And I will make them as the mourning of a beloved friend, and those with them as a day of grief." Baldness and sackcloth go together. If you intentionally shave your head bald, but you do not gird yourself with sackcloth, you are not truly in mourning. You're simply following the custom of the heathen, which is to shave their heads bald as a fashion statement. The Most High never intended for Israelites to shave our heads bald as a fashion statement. Shaving your heads bald is supposed to be reserved for the mourning process. The Most High even tells the other nations to gird themselves in sackcloth when He brings destruction upon them. So if Israelites are claiming to be in mourning and shaving their heads bald, Israelites need to be walking around in sackcloth, not in the finest that money can buy. Isaiah chapter 15, I will read verses 1 to 3. Isaiah chapter 15 verses 1 to 3 shows us a warning that the Most High gave to Moab. These are not Israelites, but let's hear what He tells them to do when they are mourning. It says, "The word against the land of Moab. By night the land of Moab shall be destroyed, for by night the wall of the land of Moab shall be destroyed. Grieve for yourselves, for even Dibon, where your altar is, shall be destroyed. Thither shall ye go up to weep over Nabal of the land of Moab. Howl ye, baldness shall be on every head." This is a normal practice, making yourself bald when mourning, and all arms shall be wounded. Verse 3, "Gird yourself with sackcloth in her streets." So even the Moabites were told that when they shaved their heads bald in mourning, they should gird themselves with sackcloth. It continues, "And lament upon her roofs, and in her streets, and in her ways, howl all of you with weeping." If you are shaving your head bald, and you're using mourning as an excuse to continue to do so, you better be howling, weeping, lamenting, mourning, grieving, and wearing sackcloth. Otherwise, you're making a mockery of the Most High and His people, and that sin will not be forgiven. As we can see from this passage, baldness and sackcloth go together even when the other nations are in mourning. The Most High never intended for baldness to be a fashion statement. In conclusion, it is not a sin for an Israelite man to shave his head bald unless he is a Levitical priest. Nevertheless, shaving our heads bald should be reserved for when we are in mourning. This should be accompanied by wearing sackcloth and a period of genuine grief. Baldness is not meant to be a fashion statement among Israelite men. We are not to follow the practices of the heathen. Those Israelite men who shave their heads bald, although they are not mourning, are simply demonstrating that they have lost their cultural identity and they mindlessly follow the customs of the oppressor. I pray that more Israelite men would embrace our own culture and reject that of the oppressor. And with that I say, Shalom.